Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm JC. So today's video is going to be detailing my overview of the masterclass I did on Dan Brown's masterclass of how to write a thriller. And it's a collaboration I'm doing with KaShay Warren at Shay with the Hobbies. It will also be the first in a series of sorts for me because I'm going to take several different master classes and I'm going to chronicle them for you guys. So for this particular video, I'm going to play some clips from each class and give you my take on at the end of each one. I'm not really okay. Bear with me because this is the first time I'm doing a video of this nature where I'm reviewing or giving an overview of my thoughts on a course. So I wasn't actually sure how I wanted to structure the video. I did it in the best way that I thought would work best for me, but you know, may shift some things for the next one that I do. But hopefully you will get a good picture of what takeaways I got from his class, and it will inspire you to perhaps sign up for masterclass and take it yourself. There's some really good nuggets of information in this class. I took a lot of notes. Let me see. Let's see. I took, this, I don't, can't really tell how many pages of notes. 2, 3, 15 pages of notes that I took. There are 18 classes. I don't include the introduction as a class because he's not necessarily teaching you anything in the introduction. He's just giving you an intro into who he is. I'm going to put lots of clips of the class, of my analysis after the class. This was taken over the course of a couple of days, several days actually, so hopefully you will enjoy the class or enjoy the overview of the class, and I'll be back at the end. Let class begin.
One of the things I love about books is that they are different things to all people. When you write a novel, you're not writing one novel. You're writing a million novels. And each person reads it in a different way, imagines your character in a different way. Your job is to create a framework, to create the points of interest that the reader's imagination fills in and connects. Help them imagine the story. Give them just enough to move to the next point and to bring their imagination to fill in all the blanks. At the end of this masterclass, I'm going to admit something to you that I have never admitted to anyone on earth. I'm also going to show you an artifact that nobody except me has ever seen. And that is your first lesson in suspense. I love the creative process of writing, and I wanted to teach this masterclass in hopes of helping other writers overcome some of the natural obstacles and frustrations that are inherent in the process of writing a novel. What I'm hoping to do in this class is give the actual nuts and bolts of how do you put a story together? How do you create tension? How do you build character? How do you even decide what to write about? Above all, what I'm hoping is that this class provides some truly practical tools to help writers create stories, and also I'm hoping we have a little fun along the way. I'm Dan Brown, and this is my masterclass. I was excited to learn as a young writer, as I started to put this together, talking to other writers, talking to great writing teachers, that there are elements that must be in a good story. Not just thrillers, all stories. Every single promise you make to the reader, you need to keep. What you will find when you read thrillers that you enjoy, actually any novel that you enjoy, is that you will get the answer and the outcome that you've hoped for, but it will come to you as the reader in a different way. And your job as a writer, give the reader what they want in a way they don't see coming.
Number one was about the anatomy of the thriller. And I took my copious notes here. And he's talking about the different elements of the thriller, and the hero has to have obstacles and goals. And talked about the 3 C's, which is contract, crucible, and the clock. Contract is what you make with the reader, and the promises that you make to the reader of the things that they will, how did he put this, experience. I'm paraphrasing, but throughout the novel, essentially he was talking about suspense overall is all about making promises to your reader. And crucible is that you can't let your characters run away. You have to give your hero only one path, lots of obstacles, tons of obstacles, many obstacles you want, but only one way out. And he talked about giving your readers lots of questions, but also leaving enough time, but not too much time to answer those questions. Something interesting he said. He said, what makes a book a thriller is the pace at which the plot comes at you. And I was thinking about that in reading the thrillers. I don't write thrillers yet, but I want to, which is my interest for taking this masterclass. Because I write a mystery series, I have to work on my pacing. And because sometimes I'm not always good with the answering questions as quickly as I should, maybe. I like to linger, and that works for some genres, but I don't think it works in thriller and as a reader of thriller, I know that instinctively. Another thing he said was, in order to write good suspense or thriller, you need to read critically. Because there's a myth that tells you you're not supposed to read in the genre that you're writing in currently. I don't believe that myth. And listening to Dan Brown, neither does he. And he dispels that, because it's like, why wouldn't you read in the genre that you're writing? I mean, yes, you're reading for enjoyment, but it's research. You're taking it in. You're seeing how this person crafted the story this way, and how another writer in the same genre crafted it completely different ways. And not to say that you're going to copy writing styles or methods, but we always learn from other people around us, or people that we read, or people that are doing what we want to be doing. So when he talked about reading critically, in order to be a better writer of thriller, you have to read critically. Thriller, words are hard. Read thriller critically. And I find myself doing that as I get older and more into my writing. That when I do read, yes, I'm reading to enjoy the book, obviously, but I'm reading to take in and make mental notes of how they threw this curveball in, or how they surprised me in this way, how they shaped their villain or their killer, or how their hero, the flaws that balance out the good parts of the hero or the lead character. If your lead character is the hero, some people like lead characters that are villains, but so I noticed that I do read a lot more critically when I'm reading the, as I get older, because I want to take those notes in, and those little pieces of knowledge. I want to kind of soak it in for my writing. Um, Not to copy anyone, but to learn, because I don't know everything. um, no one does that I know of. So yeah, good first lesson, and we shall continue.
Whether you are a musician, a chef, a painter, or a writer, you need to create the symphony, the souffle, the painting, or the novel that you personally like, the one that suits your taste. And then you just have to hope other people share your taste. Some people love what I do, some people hate what I do. But you stay the course as a writer. You say, well, this is just my taste. And maybe you don't share my taste. Well, fortunately, the great thing about novels and thrillers, there are all kinds of different kinds. If you don't like mine, find somebody whose taste you like. The important thing for you as a writer is to write the thriller that you would want to read. And I promise you, if you like it, somebody will share your taste. You've actually got to write what you want to know. Find what's interesting to you. Go out and research it. And your enthusiasm as you research this new material is going to help inspire you to do the hard work of writing a novel. The best advice I can give any aspiring writer is to choose a topic, choose a world that you're excited about. Maybe you don't know about it today, but you might start learning about it tomorrow. It's not about the big idea. It's never about the what. It's about the how. Every single idea has been done over and over and over. You don't need a big idea. You need big hows. Your job as a thriller writer is to get a character from point A to point B. And B doesn't have to be saving the world, but you have to get them there in the most fascinating way possible. It's not about finding that one idea that you're going to write a thriller about. It's about figuring out how you're going to make your character move through these landscapes.
Okay, so in the second lesson, he talks all about finding the idea. In the first part of that lesson, he talks about trusting your own taste. Um, Basically, not writing, because sometimes they say, well, a lot of writers spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the readers want to, what the readers want to read, what they should write and cater to certain particular audiences or whatever. So his thing was, you should never chase someone else's taste. You should basically write to your own liking, write what you would like to read, and someone else will join you along the ride and like what you like to read too. The second thing, probably might be my, well, I haven't finished the entire class yet, but it's probably going to be my favorite part of the class, because I did a video on this, and he talks about write what you want to know. And it's the biggest mistake. He's basically said the biggest piece of advice that he thinks is a mistake is to write what you know. And how when he was 16, his teacher was like, well, write what you know, write what you know. And he's like, I'm 16, I don't know anything. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know anything. How am I going to write what I know? And totally, it's the worst piece of advice that I hate. Write what you know, because what I know is limited. What I know could fit probably in one notebook, and that would be it. What I know is not a lot. I mean, I'm smart, but I'm smart enough to know I don't know all the things that I want to know. So I write what I want to know, and I love research. So I always like giving myself a perfect opportunity to do more research. And he was talking about finding what interests you, research it, and he pointed out, which is a good point, which might not have been the case when he was 16 or even when I was 16, that, because we have the internet today and the internet is so vast, we could literally find anything. If we want to write about a place that we've never been to, he gave the Taj Mahal as an example. He's like, the blueprints are online. Like, there's architecture designs and blueprints and schematics to every building you probably could ever really want to write about. So research, it's there. And writing about places that you've never been to, it's all online. It's laid out there for you. And that might not have been the case back in the day, but it certainly is now. I know, as a person writing mystery, obviously I don't know how to kill anyone. So another thing, he was talking about identifying your sole dramatic question and building the foundation of your story with that one question, that one brick of foundation. Basically, it's like, you have multiple threads. You can have multiple threads of that one question, but essentially it all boils down to that one question in a thriller or a suspense novel. And yeah, it's also talked about the moral gray area in giving that moral ambiguity, kind of making your villain almost relatable in a sense, to kind of make the hero sympathize. I mean, that's not going to be all books or whatever, but it is. I do think it is good when you have a villain or the bad guy that there's layers to, there's underlying factors, there's things that just doesn't make it so cut and dry, don't make it good and evil. It's not that simple. There's more to this person that makes them tick, that makes them do the things that they do. And when you have that kind of gray area, I think it always makes the story a little more interesting. So he talked about focusing on the how and not the what. He said you always want to have big hows, not big whys or whats. It's about getting the character from A to B, and the how that you. It's not why they're going from point A to B. It's how they get from point A to B and what obstacles they have to go through to get there. On to lesson number 3.
When I sit down and write a book, I think of location as a character. I think that if I choose the right location, it's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for me. Location will be an incredibly powerful tool for you. I'm going to give you one caveat, one word of warning. If you fall in love with your locations to too great a degree, your thriller might start reading like a travel journal. By all means, set the plot in an incredible location that's meaningful to you. Share your enthusiasm with your reader for whatever this location is. At the same time, step back and say, oh, don't forget, somebody's reading Origin to find out what happens to Robert Langdon, not to know exactly what the front of the Madrid Royal Palace looks like.
Okay, so the lesson number 3, he was talking about how he thinks of location as a character, which I love the idea of. And when I think of stories or books or even TV shows that have like the place as a character as well, I automatically think of Sex and the City, but it's one of my favorite series. But I am not good at settings. It is something I strongly need to work on. I think I've gotten a better, but I struggle with settings. So some of the things he said resonated with me, but he also did point out that don't fall so in love with your location or your setting that it overshadows the character and the story, which I don't have a problem with because, again, I'm bad at settings. But it was a short lesson. So he didn't harp on that too long, but it had some good perspective for me. Just made me think that I really need to work on my settings. On to lesson number 4.
So you've created your world, and you have this fundamental question. It's time to populate this world with characters. Thrillers can be made out of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. One thing that you absolutely have to do is you have to choose a hero that's suited to the world. If you've chosen the world of underwater archaeology, for example, my guess is your hero's not an accountant. When we're talking about populating a world with characters, I would argue you might want to write your villain first, because your villain is the one who's going to define your hero. You just need to be sure that whatever this character is that you've created, that the stakes of your novel are important to this person. Doesn't have to save the world, but whatever is happening in your story has to be of critical importance to the characters that you set in motion. You don't have to write a book where the world's going to explode, or a book that takes place in the Sagrada Familia. You can write a book that takes place in a little restaurant that you're trying to run, and maybe you took a loan from the wrong person, and all of a sudden it's come due, and you got 2 kids to feed. The stakes are big to you. That's a decent thriller. Somebody should write that.
Okay, so in lesson number 4, he talks about creating the heroes and the villains. He talks about how ordinary people need extraordinary circumstances. And he also says the hero has to be suited to the world you're writing in. And he actually suggested something interesting, which is start with the villain, which normally I wouldn't agree with. But, well, because for me, normally the story is all about the hero or the person that, triumphs over the bad person. But in this book that I'm working on now, I did start with the bad guy, the guy that I don't like, who ends up getting killed, but he's the bad guy in the story, and I did start with him, and it did make the beginning a little more interesting for me, possibly because it's so hard for me to start with a character I don't like, but yeah, and it also says give your villain relatable motivation, and that's interesting too because I always when I watch movies and stories or read books, I hate a villain that's just a villain, like just evil just because. There's no reason why they're evil. You don't know what made them that way, or perhaps there's nothing that made them that way. I don't like those kind of villains. I like the redeemable villain, there's certain stuff that you do that's not redeemable regardless, but I like the villain where there's layers, where where you have some sort of empathy for that villain because okay, troubled childhood, they were bound to end up killing someone. They had psycho parents, so of course they became a psycho. I'm exaggerating, but I like villains that tug on my heartstrings a little bit and make me want to like them, even though I'm not going to, but just makes me want to. I like those kind of villains, and it's interesting that he, pointed out or emphasized making your villains relatable and giving them that moral gray area where you want to have empathy for them. So, yeah, lots of good things in that lesson.
You're going to need to start populating this world with secondary characters. One thing you're going to see over and over in not just thrillers, but all novels, is your hero is going to have some sort of traveling partner, some sort of mentor, some sort of friend. Whenever you can, use your reader's imagination to your benefit. That's the beauty of writing novels, that you are not writing alone. You're writing with a reader who's going to do a lot of the work along with you. Your job is to create a framework, to create the points of interest that the reader's imagination sort of fills in and connects.
So in the next lesson, this talks about universal character tools, and he talks about once you've got your hero and your villain in place, you have to populate your world with secondary characters. But your secondary characters, they can't just be there for no reason. They have to complement the hero or the main character of the story. And he also talks about letting the characters materialize as you write your plot and letting your plot dictate your characters. Another thing he discussed was limiting, not having too many characters, which I've learned over the course of my writing. Less is more, and especially in terms of characters. But also, you have to establish history between your characters, because it's really strange to have a character come into the story and they have no place there, no history with the character. There's no connection. So it's like, well, what is this character doing here? What good are they? So your characters, even the secondary ones, basically have to serve a purpose, and that's kind of what he gets at most in this lesson. It's also good to make sure you know what motivates your characters, why they're doing what they're doing throughout the story. The reader doesn't have to know, but the writer has to know. Next lesson.
The characters in the Da Vinci Code all serve a different purpose in the story. And when you write your thriller, you're going to have a character, maybe a couple of characters, who really define the point of view for the whole book. That's the person you're following. But guess what? They're going to meet a lot of other people. For most writers, research is the very first thing you do. Research helps you decide what you're going to write about. Research is one of the most fun parts of writing a novel. You're learning, you're traveling, you're reading, but there are different kinds of research. Research as a first step will get you excited, it will give you ideas, and it will help you choose a world, which is really the first thing you need to do. One of your jobs as a thriller writer is going to be making connections the reader doesn't see coming. That's part of the fun. When a reader says, oh my God, that's why that happened? Or that's related to that? You, of course, know all the answers. When you're writing it, your job is to hide it and to reveal it in an exciting way. At some point, you'll need to sit down with your research and say, I may have taken 2 hours worth of notes on this, but I now realize I don't need it. And that's okay. Just because you have the information doesn't mean that you have to use it. In fact, that touches on the most important thing you're going to do as a writer, and that is editing. That is knowing what to leave out. I must give you a word of warning about research, only because I've fallen in this trap myself. There is a point when research becomes procrastination. So it's important to understand that, yes, you need to research and you need to gather information, but you also need to write a book. And there's going to come a time when you say, I know enough to start.
Okay, so lesson number 6 was just a case study of the Da Vinci Code, which is really good to know where his mind was, what he was thinking on that. So lesson number 7 and 8 are both research part 1 and part 2. They both talk about you want to do different kinds of research. You want to location research. The internet, of course, has probably everything your heart could desire in terms of finding research, maps, locations, blueprints, and all that kind of stuff. He also talked about talking to specialists and things that have people that have experience in the world you want to write about that would be more than happy to talk to you about them. But he also warned and cautioned against too much research. Don't get so caught up in research that you end up procrastinating and you're not writing. Um, while he said having an extensive amount of research is good for having backlog research for future projects, you don't want to get so overwhelmed in the research that you end up putting in useless details and things that don't really matter to the story. If it's not serving the story, toss it out. The gist of what he said.
One of the things that I thought might be very helpful in this class is to walk you through the process of creating a thriller from the ground up, creating the world, asking the questions, figuring out who the characters are, and just doing that together right here. I can't tell you what your idea should be, but I'm hoping to give you an idea of the process of turning an idea into a thriller. So we've got this thriller started. We've chosen a world. We've got moral ambiguity. We've got a hero. We've got a sidekick. We've got villains. We've got the plot started. We've got the stakes that keep elevating. This is the process that you will go through to start moving toward the finale that you know what it has to be. Now, there's something you need to remember about the hero winning. That the hero needs to win in a way we don't see coming.
So lesson number 9 is about basically him just telling you each step how to build a story from the ground up. He gives about 13 basic steps, from selecting the world and giving it gray area, creating your hero and your villain. Just he goes over individual steps in the process of building up a good story and kind of lays it out for you in simple layman's terms.
As a thriller writer, you have an incredible toolbox of tools with which to create suspense. There's so many of them. The best way to find them is to read a thriller writer's novel that you respect and look at what they do. The takeaway here is that you don't have to create all the suspense of your novel with one brick. Suspense is built by a lot of little pieces. Every parallel plot line that you're writing has questions and answers that run through them. When you set up the opening of your thriller, it's critical that you make as many promises to the reader as physically possible. And be believable, but make as many as you can. Make them as big as you can. If I were to start a chapter with my heroine walking down the street, the birds are chirping, and she's thinking, what a perfect day. Okay, that's very nice, but there's no tension involved. If I were to open that same chapter with my heroine thinking, if I don't make it to this meeting on time, I am dead, and she's bounding up a gritty staircase in an office building, sweating in her Armani suit, all of a sudden you have tension instantly. One of the ways that you can create suspense is to have your characters react to something in a horrified or sad or surprised way, but you don't show the reader what they're looking at. The reader actually has to keep reading to find out what was so upsetting to your character. It's called withholding. Withholding is one of the real keys to writing suspense. Again, it's as simple as saying, I know something you don't know, and I'm going to withhold that information as long as I can, and then I'll give it to you.
Lesson number 10 and 11, he talks about creating suspense. It's 10, part 1 and part 2. And he talks about using all of the tools in your toolkit in terms of reading other writers in the genre that you want to write in. Um, Placing secrets and little Easter eggs into your character's backstory, hidden identities, different kinds of things that you can use to create more suspense and more tension in your story, creating conflict between the characters, creating maybe a certain dynamic between the hero and the villain, maybe where there's history there, and some of it may be even good. Most of it is bad. Um, there, he suggests to always start your chapters with a sense of urgency or with either the answer to a question, and he kind of suggests to leave your chapters kind of with a question hanging in the balance, like a little cliffhanger for each chapter, but never to leave the entire story as a whole with a cliffhanger. He likes to wrap up the entire story by the end of the book and answer all the questions that he promised he would answer at the beginning. He also talks about using flashbacks in a believable way, and not um, not a way that doesn't make sense, because sometimes you'll read stories that have a flashback that kind of doesn't make sense for there to be a flashback right there. But he talks about using flashbacks to make a revelation to or a realization for the character. He also suggests to maybe compress the timeline of your story to maybe have it span over the course of 24 hours or the course of a week instead of over months and months and months of time, where you could be more vague about things. He said to compress the story, which I've never actually thought about doing a story that takes place in such a short span of time, but it's an interesting thought. Okay, next lesson.
So when you actually move from your outline into that moment when you actually start writing a chapter, you might ask yourself, well, how do I do this? How do I know what goes in this chapter? One of the easiest things you can do is just literally create one bullet point. What is this chapter trying to accomplish? When you set out to create obstacles for your hero that are going to define him or her, choose obstacles that are interesting to you.
So lesson 12, the most interesting thing I found about lesson 12 is that I've never heard a writer describe writing chapters and scenes in, is to think musically. Never quite heard it put that way, but when he explains it in the lesson, you kind of get it. But and you know, sometimes in music, the parts that are interesting in music is the parts without the lyrics, the quiet parts. So it kind of like it's like, sometimes there are the quiet parts to your chapters that is saying something without really saying anything. And so he talked about that. Finding fresh ways to begin your chapters, um, in terms of painting your characters into a corner, um, choosing obstacles that are intellectually challenging for the reader and not just something simple to start the chapter off with.
Controlling the point of view, if you do it well, your reader will not realize they're reading. They'll feel like they're a character experiencing the action. Shifting points of view from chapter to chapter can help you create variety. To see the same scene from different people's points of view will help you spice up the same scene just by looking through a different lens.
Lesson number 13 was mostly talking about selecting or utilizing the, the different types of points of view, and he talked about the various POVs that people use and that you want to experiment with different POVs. He even suggested that sometimes if you write chapter and it may be not working for you, try writing the chapter again in a completely different point of view, like maybe from the secondary character's point of view, or from the villain's point of view, to see if one works better than the other, or to even give you new perspective on the first round of that chapter that you wrote. So that's interesting to me because I think I might actually try writing. I've never really usually when I pick a point of view I stick to it. So I don't really experiment through the writing process with different points of views. I may experiment with writing a different point of view from the start. Like that was always my plan. But I never write a chapter or write a few chapters and then say, let me write this from the other character's point of view. Never tried that, and perhaps it would be a good exercise for you to try as well.
One of the easiest ways to bring your exposition to life is to appeal to your reader's senses. Don't just tell them what it looks like. Tell them what it smells like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. If a character walks into a seedy bar, don't just tell them that it's dark and smoky. Tell them what's playing on the jukebox. Tell them about the grit under their feet as they walk across the floor, and they will immediately feel like they are there. Appeal to your reader's senses. That's the way that we as human beings experience the world. Dialogue, what characters say, is going to play an enormous role in revealing plot and in revealing character. And when you're writing dialogue, there are a few things that you absolutely have to remember. Above all, the dialogue that you create for a character has to be appropriate for that character. You have to take into account their level of education, their facility with whatever language they're speaking, their world point of view. Ideally, if you take away he said and she said, you should be able to look at a line of dialogue and know exactly who said it just by the way it's written. Then you know you're reading good dialogue.
Lesson number 14 is he talked about exposition and dialogue. You are showing, or yeah, not telling, but showing the reader something from the character's angle. You want to give a sensory way of describing things, taste, smell, how something feels, not just what it looks like, but what, like if you're talking about the ground, or say the ground is made of gravel, talk about the gravel feeling underneath your feet, or he gives examples like that. And he talks about keeping your prose transparent, and dialogue being a good way to get inside the character's head without doing a whole bunch of and she said this and she said that. Instead, you'll have the characters saying it. But in case of when you're having two different characters, obviously you have to make sure that it sounds like the individual characters and not one person. Let's talk about using dialogue to create the conflict, or to display or let the readers know that there's conflict between two characters. Using dialogue in that way. Also said not to overuse dialogue, which is something I do struggle with because I like dialogue a lot. And it's a lot of good nuggets in lesson 14 about using flashbacks and the tense of flashbacks that you want to use it in, and perfect past tense and perfect tense, and different things that you'll find in there that are really good and helpful information for those of you who struggle writing dialogue or don't like to write dialogue. It's a lot of helpful things that he gives you in that.
You as a novelist need to find that commitment to your idea, but temper it with an understanding that you're not going to get it right the first time. There's a difference between being committed to your idea and being a lazy editor. You'll often hear writers say that the difference between good writers and bad writers is that good writers know when they're bad. The most important skill you're going to have as a writer is to know when you're bad. having that critical instinct to know that it's not right and delete it without beating yourself up over it. Because guess what? That's part of the process. Editing is part of the process of writing.
Lesson 15, he talks about editing and rewriting. He said, you're going to write a lot, but you're going to edit even more, and that you should know when a scene or when something is just not working. And there's a quote he says, and he says it a couple times throughout the masterclass, and he says the difference between a good writer and a bad writer is that a good writer knows when their writing is bad, and then they fix it. So he talks explicitly about that in the editing and rewriting portion, because he said you have to know when it's not working. He also says to edit from the perspective of a reader, which is, as he also points out, it's good to give yourself time from the manuscript, from when you finish the manuscript to when you pick it up again to read, because you want to read it from the angle or the point of view as a reader, like you're not the one who wrote this. And I have a few books that I could probably do that, because it's been years since I have finished it, and I did not go back and touch it. I meant to, but then I started a new project, and then I started another new project. But you know.
So you're setting out to write a novel, and you're smart enough to know writing a novel is about a process. It is not all about inspiration and craft. It is about making sure that you set aside time every day to do your work. You have to be gentle with yourself when it comes to the output each day. You have to look at it and say, you know what, I didn't have a very good day. But you need to be very tough on yourself when it comes to process. And sometimes finding a scene that works requires writing the wrong scene a few times. That's okay. Don't be too tough on yourself. Type like nobody's watching. Because guess what? Nobody's watching.
So number 16. The next lesson is protecting your process. That one was just mostly about creating your writing routine and sticking to it, and making sure that you are persistent about sticking to your process, and that you don't apologize for your writing routine, your process, to anyone. That you be very strict about your writing routine and your process. If you say you're going to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, he gets up at 4, but I'll say 5 because that's already really early. But if you say you're going to get up at 5 a.m., then get up at 5 a.m., put your butt in the chair, and you sit and you write and protect the process. And he says that, you may not write much of anything good in those hours, but the point is the process, to maintain the continuity of the process. He says to protect the process, and the results will take care of themselves. So basically, get your butt in the chair and write is what he's saying. And he's talks about limiting distractions. He actually places himself in an area with no internet access. So if he needs to research anything, he has to actually mark it and research it at a later point in the day when he actually is near internet access, which kudos to him. Not sure I can do that part. But he also says to give crazy ideas a chance, to don't be afraid to write bad ideas, to write them out, to explore them in detail, because even if they're bad, there might be a nugget of a good idea that comes out of it. He gives this great story about talking to Steven Tyler from Aerosmith and their creative process. I'll let you guys watch that for yourself. Can't tell you everything.
The process itself needs to be the reward. You can't be striking out saying, if I don't sell X number of books, I've failed. You need to love the process of writing a novel and understand that it takes time to build a readership, that your first novel almost invariably will sell very few copies. You have to love what you do and do it for the sake of writing. Do it for the sake of sharing a story with your readers. And then, in the same way that you are committed to your story from beginning to end, be committed to the process of building your career, of building an audience.
And let's see. The last one before he gets to his big secret, which you'll have to watch to see. He talks about life as a writer, and he talks about the fact that when he wrote his first book, how it didn't sell, and when he did his first book signing, no one came to talk about his book, and he realized then that the process has to be the reward, not the adulation or the fans or the money you will hopefully eventually make. The process itself has to be the reward, because you could not sell books in your first novel or your second. In his case, I think he said he didn't really become popular until his fourth book, and then people went back and looked at his first three books and said, oh, well, let me rediscover him. But it wasn't until his fourth book where he actually started to become a name and get known and become popular. So he said in that case, well, you have to have something that makes you feel rewarded and rewarding for your work. I think where he was going with that was, if you're writing and you don't feel like you've won anything or been rewarded in some kind of way, you may not keep going. So the process has to be the reward, because the process remains the same no matter what number book you're writing.
At the beginning of this masterclass, I made a promise to you. I told you that I would admit something to you that I had never admitted to anyone, and that I would show you an artifact that only I had seen. And of course, we know how important keeping promises is to the storytelling process, so I want to do that now.
So that was my masterclass experience with Dan Brown's How to Write a Thriller. And I hope that you got some good takeaways from the class. I hope that it inspires you to go and experience the class for yourself, because obviously I didn't include all of the nuggets. You have to actually go take the class. But I wanted you to get a good sense of what you would be getting by taking his class. And maybe it makes you want to go buy his books like it made me want to go buy some of the ones I didn't have. So I hope that you got something out of this. There are tons of classes on Masterclass other than Dan Brown, but I particularly love this class. And it's good knowledge that I can use in writing any kind of suspense or even mystery, because there's suspense in mystery. Even cozy mysteries, they have a level of suspense in them, not to as high a degree level as the thrillers that he writes, but they do have a level of suspense. And so I can use this information across multiple genres, and that's one of the many things I loved about taking this class. So it's going to be it for this video. If you like what you see and you want to see more videos from me, make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button. Also, there will be a link to the video that KaShay did in the description box, so you can find her video in there and go please watch her video as well, so you can see what lessons she took away from Dan Brown's masterclass. And with that, let me know in the comments, have you done any masterclasses yet? If you have taken some, which ones did you take and what did you learn from them? Until next time, have a blessed day. Bye.